tonight. My next guest has seen his fair share of gubernatorial inaugurations. Assemblyman Jack McEneny is a veteran state legislator. He's also a historian with a deep knowledge of both the state capitol and the capital city. He's joining us in the studio tonight. Thank you very much for your time, Assemblyman.
Well, thank you, and a Happy New Year to you and all your viewers.
And to you. Thank you very much. So the history of this is kind of interesting. I cannot remember, but I don't go back nearly as far as you do in terms of my knowledge, someone being sworn in the war room before.
I think that's unprecedented. Normally the inauguration is a large public event, except perhaps in time of war, and that invites the general public in en masse. And we all remember 4 years ago with Governor Spitzer. That was worthy of Cecil B. DeMille. Just a huge area outdoors, and he took a real chance on the weather, but it worked out.
It was cold.
It worked out very well. It was cold.
It did.
And I remember Mario Cuomo had it once down in the convention center, and George Pataki had it in the Times Union Center, the Knickerbocker Arena, or whatever
at the
name
time,
they were
right?
using at the time. It was the Pepsi Arena, and the inauguration is usually much more public.
What is the significance? I mean, there has been some talk about what does it mean to be holding this in the war room, to be, obviously we know about the austerity message, we get it, but do you think that holding it in the war room, what's the historical significance of that, the sort of symbolic significance of that, if anything?
I don't know. The war room, as probably most of your viewers know, was beautifully restored by Governor Pataki, and serves as the waiting room, the antechamber, before you go in to see the governor or perhaps his staff.
Was it always that, though, historically?
No, it was originally supposed to be open space, and one of the architectural problems with the Capitol is you always feel you went through a back door.
Right.
You know there's a bigger, better entrance somewhere, but you just didn't find it.
You can't find it.
And what was originally planned is you would come in on the bottom level where the governor is dropped off under the steps. You would come in, you'd go through an antechamber, and then you'd go to the bottom of a 180-foot shaft, which was a tower with a small dome on top of it. You'll see old pictures of the Capitol with it. It was never built. It was too expensive, and also they were afraid because they had structural problems on the Washington Avenue side, and they were worried about that much weight. So that was canceled in 1894 when the building opened in '79, to put it in perspective. And then that area got gobbled up for offices for the press on the third floor and so on. And Al Smith in the 1920s decided that there was no war memorial. You can't have a chapel in a public building, but there was a need for a place that was contemplative, a place that was a memorial. And you call it a war memorial, and the first one complains, you call them a communist. So that's is equivalent of a chapel.
Right.
And everything stops in 1927, so there's nothing there in the murals from World War II, for example.
Oh, that's why.
And it's all done by William de Leftwich Dodge, who did murals in public buildings, including Boston City Hall, and his daughter. And in the middle, dressed up like a character out of a Wagnerian opera, is Liberty, dressed in chainmail and looking quite bellicose, and the face on Liberty just happens to be de Leftwich Dodge's daughter. Not that there'd ever be a conflict of interest in the Capitol.
Of course not.
But it's a beautiful setting. It was used for just storage during the Cuomo years, and it had a temporary wall so you could get through a passageway, and it was Pataki that just did a magnificent job restoring it.
He actually did a lot. Governor Pataki did quite a bit in restoring the Capitol. That room is really beautiful. It really is. And it'll be interesting, though, because it's not holding a lot of people, that room.
I just went through there, and I would say 200 or slightly less.
Right.
So it's very small.
So now, instead of having the public come in, they're holding these public meet and greets, if you will, at the mansion.
Yes.
Elliot Spitzer revived that tradition. Do you know actually who had started it?
Well, I remember the mansion opened, going back to Rockefeller. It was open on New Year's Day, and he did that particularly after the fire when the mansion had been shut down for repairs. And I remember everybody went. The huge lines were there. So
did you go?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you did.
I went with Rockefeller there. In fact, a funny story. He forgot to invite Mayor Corning.
Oops.
So Mayor Corning and Mrs. Corning got on the back of the line, which was somewhere on Madison Avenue next to the cathedral, and the word got out, and they kept sending out Capitol Guard saying, the governor would like you to come in, and Corning would say, we're here with our people, it's all right. And so about an hour and a half later or more, when he finally got there and went through the greeting, let me tell you, the next year Corning was inside from then on. And
never forgotten. Never forgotten
Yeah.
again. Do you? There's not going to be a lot of elected officials there. I mean, we have spoken.
I wouldn't think so. How would you choose with
Well, that's the
212
point, right?
legislators?
The mayor is
Yeah.
going to be there of the capital city. He's going to
Yes.
be emceeing the event. Is that? Do you find that to be a slight, or is it again sending a message from the governor to the legislature?
Well, I'm not sure what's on the governor-elect's mind, but he seems to be moving the great public show that we have for inaugurations into merging it into State of the State, which will have an extra 1,000 or more people there by moving that out of the Capitol and putting it in the convention center. So somehow I suspect that very public function that goes on in an inauguration, what you're going to lose in a small, somewhat elite crowd, you may make up with a greatly expanded State of the State. Of course, most people don't see either one anyway. Thanks to television, they get the message, but most people are not there physically.
Do you? You're not entirely thrilled with the idea of relocating
no,
the State of the
I'm
State?
the historian. I'm the historian officially.
I might be understating that a little bit.
No, one, I don't like the convention center. I think it looks like a cellar with raw cement around it and no natural light. And two, I think ending a tradition which started in 1923 with Al Smith. Officially, what the governor has to do is give a message which can be written, and originally he had to hand it personally. Then another constitution knocked it out in the 1820s, and 100 years later, Smith decided that he would read it and bring it and hand it personally. Of course, he was an ex-speaker as well as an ex-member. And I thought it was a rich tradition. The message is the message by Constitution of the governor to the legislature. And of course the press covers it no matter what.
Sure.
So I think people seeing that grandeur of the New York State Capitol and the Assembly Chamber, I think that was a part of it. I feel the same way that I think a member of Congress would feel if President Obama decided the State of the Union should be moved down to the Kennedy Center.
Well, but it does get awfully tight in there. It's very, very crowded.
It'll get tight any place. I mean, it's I don't care how many seats you have, there's never going to be enough. And I do take issue that there was nobody but legislators and lobbyists there. Most of the tickets I had, and I got 6 or 8 of them, at various locations, not necessarily right in the chamber, went to ordinary people who all over the state went to their assembly or senate member.
He's actually changing quite a lot in terms of not just tradition, but also in terms of trying to open up the Capitol. For example, there have been reports that he's going to remove have the barriers on State Street removed.
I've worked with him on that, and
You
I've
have.
spoken with him at length, and I think that's a very positive idea. Following 9/11, I think there was a national policy of the most conspicuous security possible. And so the irony was that while 99% of all your container ships weren't even checked when they came into American ports, where you have great gatherings of people, you had all kinds of security. I think that went too far. I think part of it was a war on terror, keep everybody on message that were in danger.
But I thought you and I also once had a discussion about there's a legal requirement to have the passage from State Street to Washington Avenue open for the public to move through.
I tried that.
Oh, it didn't work out.
I believe it, but nobody ever found it carved in stone. And when I was a boy, and many of your viewers would know, the Capitol had to be kept open because technically it was sitting on top of Hawk Street.
Right, that's
right.
right.
So the Washington and the State Street doors were always open, so people could wander through 24 hours a day. But that all ended with 9/11.
So you do believe that this is a good idea, the reopening, if you will, of the People's Building?
Oh, I think so. Losing those Jersey barriers will be just wonderful, and I think we ought to take a look at those heavy metal, they look like East German border guard, swing gates.
Yep. I heard those might be on the chopping block, too.
Well, yeah. Now you go down to Washington, D.C., which is also the People's House. You don't find that level of security. You find there are things they do For example, they can get solid steel poles, sink them right into the pavement, and pull them up when they need them. And they're not there when they don't need them, and they're not terribly visible when they do need them.
Well, it is interesting to have a historical perspective of all of this, and I really appreciate you coming in and sharing it with us. Thank you so much, Assemblyman Jack McEnany.
Thanks. Nice to be here. Happy New Year.